Welcome to Global Voices, where every story matters. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Global Voices, the podcast where readers and writers will share their love and passion for books. My name is Teuta Medra, and this is the second episode of Writing Beyond Borders. Today, I will be chatting to Helen Matthews. Helen, thank you so much for having the time to speak with me today. I'm really thrilled to have you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to meet you. We've spoken a lot, haven't we, and messaged a lot, but this is the first time we've been face to face.
Then we see each other face to face.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's lovely. It's so great to see you.
Thank you. First, to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, about me. Yes, absolutely. So I worked a career in human resources and employee benefits and all the rest of it, but always wanted to be a writer. So while I was working in my career and bringing up my children, I used to write at night, as we all do, with a glass of wine by the side and burning the very late midnight oil. And in those days, I wrote a lot of short stories. I used to send them off to magazines, and they would say, thanks for submitting, but your stories are a little bit too dark for our audience, because I always had a dark taste in the kind of things I used to write. So then I started writing articles. This obviously was alongside my day job. And I had quite a lot of success with that because I think in those days, it was just before the internet had really, really taken off. And you used to get paid for writing articles. And sometimes I got, between, 200 and I was got £1,000 for an article that was based on, so whereas these days, I think if you want to write articles, you're very unlikely to be paid for them because the world is full of people who are giving content for free.
Yes.
So that was something that I've learned over the years. But writing those articles, and I did a couple of columns for the BBC, which were recorded and broadcast on BBC, which you might not know because you wouldn't have perhaps had English radio in those days. That kept my hand in until I had a little bit more time. I sort of started to work a bit more part-time, and then I was able to spend more time on my writing.
When did you started writing books? So switching from articles to books.
Yeah, so I was writing novels, but I kind of knew that they weren't hitting the mark. They weren't really good enough, and I think some of that was because my day job was very much sort of analytical. It was legal. It was sometimes financial. I worked a lot with contracts, with numbers, all of those things, and also I managed a lot of people, and I would go home like in the evenings, and my creative brain was half dead. I couldn't dredge that creativity out of me. So although I was writing novels, they just weren't really. They didn't fly off the page. They were a bit dull. So I plotted my route out of corporate work into sort of part-time consultancy by applying to do a master's in creative writing, which I did at Oxford Brookes University. And I thought that would help to unleash that creativity that had been stifled by always working, with really factual things. So I did that MA, which was really brilliant, and I was still sort of working alongside. And then I wrote one novel when I was on the MA, started submitting to agents. I sort of knew it wasn't really good enough, but I had
you had that kind of feeling.
Why is it? Yeah, I think all of us authors know that feeling, don't we? So what I did was I had this light bulb moment that I was doing that thing that authors are often told, which is write what you know. So I was writing these very sort of domestic, probably more drama than suspense. They weren't really psychological, like I try to write now. And I decided I would start to write something that I didn't know, so that I had to research it and could get really excited about it myself. And hopefully, with me being excited about what I was writing, it would be more exciting for the reader. And that is how I got into writing the one that you and I first met over, which was This one.
Yes, I was going there actually because this podcast is actually designed for writers, women who are immigrants and they write in English, which is not their first language. But this
Right.
is not your case. On the other hand, you write books about Albanian women, immigrants, and I was wondering why is that?
Okay, so when I decided that I was going to write about this subject, this very hideous crime of human trafficking, and I was involved with a charity called Unseen, which works with survivors. I, read a lot, and I spoke to the people that ran the charity quite a lot. And I looked at the research and statistics, and we're talking about probably 10 years ago now, or getting on for 10 years ago. And what I discovered was that the number one country at that time from which people were being trafficked into the UK was Albania. And of course, I didn't really know anything at all about Albania at the time. But I was absolutely fascinated, really, to know, why is this? Why is this happening? And that was when I started to learn more, not just about the crime, but also became interested in learning more about Albania, which ended up with me going to Albania with my son, doing a bit, because I wrote, I did a lot of research that you can do from like reading books and watching YouTube, reading about
And
Albania.
contacting Albanian people like me.
Absolutely. Well, I was really lucky that I did, that through doing that, I was lucky to get to know some Albanian people. But I realized that I'd like created it in my mind. But I had to go there. And so I spent like a week there, nearly a week
Okay.
with my son. And what we were able to organize was to spend half a day with an Albanian family. And I explained, because I got this all organized through like a tour organizer who
Okay.
gave us a guide, he interpreted. And I wanted to visit a family that was in a rural area, where they would be like the family of the character Odessa in the
After leaving the
novel
village.
would be cut off. And so we had somebody who was an interpreter, and we talked a lot about their lives, and it was so fascinating. And it turned out that it wasn't, I didn't have to change a lot of what I'd already written, because
Okay.
my research had already led me to some very good conclusions. But as I've said to you in the past, I appreciate that I'm obviously going to get a lot of things wrong. So all the mistakes and errors are mine. But I did really benefit and value the time that I spent with that family, which was really great.
Okay. This is what you are showing us is After Leaving the Village, the book I read and I loved it. But now that book is recently published, Girl Out of Sight, or am I mistaken?
That's correct. Yeah. So I think this is something that might be quite interesting to perhaps to listeners, because I certainly, wasn't expecting my book to have like lots of lives. But this book has actually it's now on its third life with a third publisher. So this basically was, After Leaving the Village, was my debut novel, and it came out in 2017 with a small publisher. And that publisher was, I was like the third or fourth author they published. They were still finding their way. So they gave me a limited time contract. There was an end date to the contract. It didn't roll over. And when it came to the end of that contract, I was signed for my new books with a new publisher called Darkstroke Books. So Darkstroke had brought out 2 books, and I approached them and said, After Leaving the Village, I'm getting the rights back. Would you be interested? And they were interested. So they brought it out as that one, Girl Out of Sight.
Yes.
That came out in 2022 with that dark blue cover, which I think is, although I love the red cover, I think this cover is a bit better for the genre, because it probably signals to the reader that it is like a suspense behind closed doors type of story. So I love that cover, and it did quite well with Darkstroke. And then earlier this year, we got this very sad news that Darkstroke Books, which was a really great publisher, really collaborative, fantastic author community, but small, that they were going to wind up the business. and their date for winding up the business is actually the 30th of September.
Okay.
But before that, they were prepared to give authors their rights back if they wanted them sooner. So what happened was another indie author called Bloodhound Books, which actually is a much bigger publisher than Darkstroke, sort of took an interest in the fact that some authors were becoming available. And for some of us, they agreed to take on our backlist. So Bloodhound has signed 3 books from my Darkstroke backlist, one of them being that one, Girl Out of Sight.
But there is another cover, right?
Absolutely.
Which I absolutely love this, the last one. Yes, I really love it.
I mean, that is a fabulous cover, isn't it? It's still, you know, it's so different, and it's really attention grabbing because people browsing for books, they only see like a postage stamp size, don't they, on Amazon? And yeah, so it came out about 6 weeks ago for the 3rd time with that cover, which is bizarre, isn't it, really? I mean, it's amazing, it's bizarre, and it's great.
It's amazing, really. But
so it has
this is not the only book you have written about Albanians.
Right.
You have also another book about Albanian women.
With an Albanian character.
Yes.
Although, to be fair, that Albanian character was actually born in the UK. She was, yeah. So when I had finished after leaving the village, and a lot of people read it, a lot of book clubs read it, I got a lot of reviews and messages from people saying they would love a sequel to that book. And I tried, so I thought, how could I extend the characters' stories? And I had a storyline and I had a plot, and I was working towards it. And I wrote as much as 30,000 words, which, as you know, takes a long time.
Yes.
It's very, very hard. And I reached this point of like 30,000 words where the characters went silent on me. It was a very, very strange experience because normally up to a point the words pour out, don't they? And then you have to go back and it was like the characters were saying, we've told you our story, we're not telling you anymore.
It's enough.
Exactly. And I think in a way that was like fair enough. So it was very hard, like coming back from that, and I wrote something completely different afterwards, which wasn't anything to do with trafficking or modern slavery. Then I sort of had all this research that I'd done for the new story of the book. And eventually that sort of brewed into something I could use in another book, which I believe you've also read, which is called The Girl in the Van. So the character in this, and you mentioned like an Albanian character, there is a main character in this whose name is Miriana, and thank you very much because you helped me with names as well. Because the first name I came up with was like a potentially more of a male name.
Yeah.
So I came up with the sort of female version, and I like that name. It's lovely because it's a name that is accessible, isn't it, to people of all nationalities.
Yes.
It's an attractive name, but it's also just that little bit. It's Albanian, so that's great. Happy. So this character in this book, she is of Albanian heritage. Her parents are Albanian. They had come to the UK during the time in the late 1990s when a lot of people left the country to start a new life. They came on the back of the conflict in Kosovo. So even though they weren't Kosovan, I've learned through my research that a lot of people from Albania took that opportunity to come out and say they were Kosovo and to settle in the UK. And there are many, very established, successful, happily settled in the UK Albanians, who are living a great life and contributing economically and bringing up their families. So that's all really good. But my character's parents, Albanian parents, they had a problem because later on it was discovered that they had left illegally. And she was 16 years old at the time. Their daughter was 16, but she'd only ever lived in the UK. She'd been brought up.
She only knew UK as a country, as her country. Yeah,
they'd never gone home because they knew they didn't have the right paperwork. So although the parents were both working in proper jobs, and she'd done all her education, so when her parents were on the verge of being deported, she decided that she would go missing. So that she didn't have to leave the UK and go back to Albania with her parents. And so the difficult part of her story begins then. because obviously going missing at that age, she was very vulnerable, and she was in a vulnerable situation.
Yes.
I took that into another, not another modern slavery type theme, which is called, in this country, we call it county lines. And it's a crime where mainly drug gangs entice young people to carry drugs for them out of the big cities into smaller towns or rural areas. Because, the drug gangs are trying to establish more territory all the time. And they prey on these vulnerable children and teenagers, because those teenagers can go under the radar quite often. They're not necessarily stopped, but the traffickers have a terrible hold over them. So if somebody gets into that situation, it's very, very dangerous and very hard for them to escape.
Yeah.
So I love this book. It's also gone offline for the moment because it's one of the books that Bloodhound are going to republish. It'll have a new cover.
Going to be published?
It's coming back out, yeah. So,
nice.
like I said, Bloodhound, they didn't just take Girl Out of Sight, they took 3 books from my backlist.
That's nice.
And this is one, and this is coming out again in January.
Are your books published in Albanian?
Oh, if only. I mean, my books are only published in English at the moment. They haven't been, the publishers I've been with have all been lovely in different ways. And Bloodhound Books is a much bigger publisher than the previous 2. So they do, I think, occasionally get translation deals for some of their books. But I have to say that, I'm not optimistic that would happen for mine. And that's partly because, the books have been out before. Yeah, so like there's much more chance of perhaps a brand new book getting a translation deal. It's the same as when people say, is your book going to be filmed? It'd be a great film, it'd be a great Netflix series. I agree. The chance of that happening is like, 1 in a million, isn't it? Really? It's a tiny.
But you never know. I really hope that they will be published in Albanian as well. Why not? Okay, Helen, let's shift our focus a little bit to writing in general. What is most challenging about writing for you? And do you have a sort of routine that you wake up, you write, a place where you sit to write?
So yes. So when we talk about writing, I think perhaps readers might be surprised to know that, there's an awful lot more to it than just putting the words down on the page. So yes, when you're working on a new novel, you spend a lot of time doing that, and I'll do that. I'll take that on holiday with me, and I'll carry on writing when I'm on holiday. But I usually write, I'm quite a planner because I think I said I've got a business background. So I know some people, they don't do a lot of planning. They just go straight into their book and, are able to just dash it all off.
Answer, and that's the start.
Yeah. But I will start with a plan. But of course, I expect that I'm going to deviate from that plan because as you start writing and getting to know your characters, they take on a life of their own. And there are certain things you can't force them to do, and they would, and then you think of more twists and you think of more incidents. So I'm a planner who goes off plan. But I will write like my first draft. I think some of us call it like an ugly draft. The draft that is full of holes and it's got loads of things wrong with it. And I do lots and lots and lots of rounds of editing. So some of those I do like on my own before I show it to anybody. But I'm in various writing groups, but in particular, I'm in one critique group with some other writers, one of whom you might know. Her name's Catherine Johnson. Do you know Katie Johnson?
Yes.
Because she's a member of one of the Facebook groups we're all. We meet fortnightly and we critique our works in progress, and we do probably about 2 chapters each. And that is really brilliant because fortnightly is often enough that you can remember the person's story, and 2 chapters is good because you get through the, critiquing your book quite fast. And we're all quite forensic, we're good friends, but we also we don't hold back on criticizing the things that need fixing.
How do you react? How do you react when they criticize your work?
Oh, I'm as tough as old boots now. I think on my MA course, actually, that was quite useful because I'd always had, been in writing groups and had criticism leveled at me. But on the MA course, it was really tough. And sometimes they would bring in really respected novelists and, people from the newspapers who would read bits of our work. We would just get a real roasting sometimes. But then you learn to roll with it. Yeah, you listen. I mean, the thing is, the criticism isn't always correct. You've got to filter it. But within that feedback, there's going to be something that you need to know. And you can take something out of it and you can make your work better.
Yes.
And I always come from that point of view. So, if I'm critiquing, let's say, Katie's work, then I know I'm going to love it because I love her writing style and she knows I love it. But I'm going to tell her, I'm not going to tell her everything I like. I'm going to tell her everything that I think she could improve. And so hopefully that's really useful to her. And the same, when they give feedback to me. And then so we go home after our fortnightly session, improve our work, and then work on the next chapters and bring them to the next.
It's difficult to get an agent or a publishing house. This is for the listeners who might think, okay, I'm writing a book right now and I want to reach out to an agent or find a publishing house. Is it difficult?
I would say it's very, very difficult because,
but not impossible.
No, totally not impossible. So early on, I spent quite a lot of time looking for an agent. That was why there was quite a long lag between me having finished writing after leaving the village. And I was so naive, when I sent it out to agents, if I got a request for the full manuscript, which I did get quite a lot of agents did ask, because you send out first 3 chapters, yes, a cover letter and a synopsis. If they like it, and that might take some time, they'll come back to you and ask for the whole manuscript. So me, when I was asked for the full manuscript, which I probably had about 5 requests, I stopped sending it to others and I just sat and waited. I thought, oh, they've asked for the full manuscript. This is really exciting. I'll just wait and see. And you wait months and months and months, and you don't, and then maybe ultimately it's a no. And I've wasted all that time. I could have been pitching to others. So I would say to people who are starting out, if they've got something that they think is going to be good for an agent, send it to loads. Send it in batches. Like, don't send 100 at once. Send maybe, I don't know, 8 or 10 or something, because some of them are never going to reply to you at all. And then hopefully you'll get a little bit of feedback from some of those and maybe some requests for a full manuscript. And that feedback will give you the knowledge of, maybe you've got to tweak something before you send the next lot. Do you see what I mean? I think agents who ask for a full manuscript, they usually do give you a bit of feedback. It might only be 1 or 2 lines of why perhaps it doesn't fit with their list. But you can use that and maybe either send it to different agents, or if they've identified, maybe there's a problem with the maybe they love the start, but you haven't got the ending quite right, then you can do more work on the ending before you send it again. Whereas if you've sent it to 100, it's got that problem with the ending, for all of them. So that's 100 people that will then pass on it. But yeah, you probably have to send 100 plus.
Hope to get one.
Exactly. But so to get to a publishing house, there's a few smaller, more independent publishers that allow you to submit without an agent. One of them is called Bookature.
Yes.
One of them is Bloodhound Books, the one that's publishing me. I think one of the HarperCollins imprints, I can't remember whether it's One More Chapter.
Are you working on a new project right now? And if so, can you give us a hint what's coming next?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm always working on a new project, or so I've got a manuscript that's ready. I believe it's ready. It's being
like all of us, we have a manuscript that is ready and we are working on something else.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not got anything to do with trafficking or slavery. It's British characters, and there's a couple of iconic locations in it. The main character.
Is it a thriller?
Oh, it is a thriller. It's a suspense thriller. So again, it's sort of, hopefully it opens with a bang, then it sort of goes a little bit slower while we build up to learn all the characters. And then lots and lots of things happen, from about halfway through. So hopefully it'll be thrilling enough. The character leads her life in London. She gets a big redundancy package and she opens a bookshop in a rural area. So like readers always love, I love things set in bookshops. I love anything to do with bookshops.
Yes.
So I hope that's going to be interesting.
I
But
read
anyway,
all the books that has something to do with a bookshop or
yeah. Oh,
bookstore.
good. Oh, there we are. Then you can read this one if it ever comes. If it
I'd
ever
love
comes.
to read that one, so I'm waiting for it.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So basically what happens is a lot of people start showing up in this town who initially weren't really necessarily connected with her. Like at her leaving party from the big bank that she worked in, on the day of her leaving party, a senior executive from the bank sort of sees her, talks to her, sort of hits on her really. And a few weeks after she's settled in her new town, he turns up in that place, and she finds out he's buying a massive converted wood mill house. He's basically moving there. So he's moved there, and then all sorts of other people keep appearing who connect, and none of them really were connected to her, but she's at the center of all of this mysterious goings on. So I'm hoping that will be intriguing enough for a publisher, for some publisher to want to publish it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's ready, but it hasn't got a publisher at the moment.
Let's hope for the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
My last question was going to be, where can the readers find your books? But now it's just the A Girl Out of Sight that is published, and the rest will be published later.
Right. So I've got, as well as Girl Out of Sight, I've got a book which, again, I got the rights back from the first publisher, and I decided to self-publish. So this is called Lies Behind the Ruin.
Yes.
It's republished as an ebook by me. I did it about a year ago because I wanted to have a practice at doing that. It's got a different cover, actually. I'm sorry I haven't got the visual of that cover. That one is always available. Just like search my name and my books on Amazon, and Lies Behind the Room will come up. And that one is about a couple who their life in the UK is falling apart, and they decide that they'll escape to France, convert a house, start a new life. But all the secrets and lies that they were harboring follow them, bringing great danger and danger to their daughter. So yeah, it's a domestic suspense, and it does quite well actually. And the nice thing about that is it's in my own control. So like I can decide things like a price drop. I can put the price down to 99p, publicize it a bit, and more people will buy it. So yeah.
Yes. Okay. Helen, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation together.
It's been lovely to meet you, and let's keep in touch because it's been very inspiring